Thank you.
Okay, we're good to go.
Very good. Thank you very much, Allison. I will call to order the regular meeting of the, it's a special meeting today, right?
Nope, today is a regular meeting.
Yeah, yes, it says a special. The regular meeting of the Clean Energy Alliance Board of Directors for Thursday, February 23rd, 2023. Susan, as clerk of the board, will you please call the roll call?
Certainly. Member Patel,
Here.
Member Melendez,
Here.
Member Garcia, Member Sanchez, Member Becker,
Present.
Vice Chair Musgrove,
Here.
Chair Drucker.
Here.
Thank you. We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. Christy, do you want to lead us in the pledge?
I would love to.
Very good.
We'll wait for the flag to appear. Ready, begin. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you very much. Are there any board comments or announcements? Seeing no hands raised, we will go on to presentations. So we have two presentations. One is from Beth Vaughn, who is the Cal CCA CEO. So Beth, welcome to the CEA. And before you start, I noticed that Joe Garcia has joined and is now present. Thank you very much, Joe, for joining us. So Beth, go ahead. Or
Good afternoon.
Or before that, Barbara, do you want to introduce Beth?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Drucker. We have invited the Chief Executive Officer of California Community Choice Association, also known as Cal CCA. That is the professional organization for CCA or CCE programs throughout the state. And we invited her to come and present to the board to give the board information about Cal CCA, how they support and advocate on behalf of CCAs, such as Clean Energy Alliance, and all the great work that they do. And we are proud to be members. So welcome, Beth.
Thank you, Barbara. And before we put up my slides, can I just ask, first of all, thank you, Chair Drucker and board members for having me today. But how many of you are new this year to CCA? How many of you have I never spoken to before? Okay, only a couple. So I'll make sure I don't go completely back to basics, Barbara. Maybe I'll focus a little bit more on the accomplishments, but that's very, very helpful. I do have a few slides. I have been doing a lot of talks at board orientation meetings for new boards. So I may skip through some of the slides so I can focus in on, I think, what you're hoping I'm going to talk about today, Barbara, in terms of our activities going forward. So if you don't mind sharing the slides. Or would you like me to share them?
I did not receive any slides.
Oh, I sent them.
Okay.
To you and Susan. So hold on. Wait 1 second.
But you should be able to share.
Yeah, I just don't have. Jeez.
Beth, I have not seen a presentation before about Cal CCA. I don't think Ed Musgrove has either. So
Great.
Most of us probably have not seen it.
I did find it, Beth, so I can bring it up.
Oh, okay, that would be great if you don't mind.
I do not mind. Sorry about that.
No worries. No worries. That would be great. So I'll do a little background. And just while Barbara's bringing that up, I just want to point out that Barbara Boswell was one of the founders of CalCCA way back in 2016. She's on the Articles of Incorporation at the Secretary of State. So Barbara, it's the brainchild of her and some of the other originators of community choice, and really have appreciated her leadership over the years, including the fact she's an officer on the CalCCA board as our secretary. So very
Wrong
standing.
presentation. Hold on. We have a number of them here queued up. So
Whichever you.
well, it's for some reason it is not cooperating. I don't know what's happening here. Let's see here.
I can.
Okay, looks like I've got the right one up now. And tell me if it's advanced.
You just need to put it into slide mode.
I'm in slide mode, but I don't think it's advancing, so hold on. Sorry about it.
That's okay. I think there's a PDF there too, if it's easier to
Got it.
share the PDF. Oh, there, perfect. Perfect, Barbara. Thank you. Sorry, folks. So yeah, you can go to the next slide. So just especially for those of you that are new, if this hasn't been shared with you, I'm doing a real big pitch these days to promote a video that we've done that is on our YouTube page. It is the Powered by Community, the California CCA story, narrated by Peter Coyote, and it features your own CEO, Barbara Boswell here, who, as you may or may not know, helped launch Lancaster Energy, so the third CCA, I think back in 2014. So it's a great story, and in 12 minutes, you will be indoctrinated into the world of CCA, but have a really good understanding of the history of how it originated and how we got to where we are today. This was first shown back in September at the gala that we held here in San Francisco to celebrate 20 years since the signing of Assembly Bill 117, which actually enabled the formation of CCAs. So a great event, and I'm not going to show it. You can go to the next slide there, Barbara. Perfect. Okay, so I do like to show this slide to folks. It really is the timeline of the formation of community choice aggregators. And while I mentioned in 2002, the enabling legislation was passed and signed by the governor, it wasn't until 2010 that MCE was formed. And then we keep all the logos of all of our CCAs up here. So I want to give a nod to board member Becker here, who Solana Energy Alliance. We've got your old logo in there in 2018. Very momentous because that was the first CCA to launch in San Diego Gas and Electric's territory. And you folks really paved the way again with Barbara's leadership there as well. So we also have on here in 2020, Western Community Energy and Be Proud, which is the city of Baldwin Park. In 2021, as you may know, WCE filed for bankruptcy and also Be Proud decertified. And there were some really important lessons learned from that we were then able in this past year work on those lessons learned, and we've produced a model practices guide that I'll speak about in a few moments. But essentially this timeline, you can see it on the map everywhere in green, are where customers are being served. Blue is affiliates of CCAs, and Oceanside here for a long time, the city of Oceanside has been an affiliate member, now a member of CEA. But those in blue, we hope to eventually turn orange and then green. And as you see here, implementation plans have been filed in those areas that are in orange. Next slide, please. So an easy way to look at this is the number of communities served by CCA in California, but most importantly are those percentages, right? So a third of the counties have community choice, 40% of the cities and towns. And ultimately that all adds up to more than 11 million customers here in California are being served. And that's really important because quite honestly, that's what gets us a seat at the table up in Sacramento, in the governor's office, in many of the debates with legislators. Next slide, please. So we track a lot of things at Cal CCA. One of them, of course, that's very important is what is coming. And so in 2023 and 2024, as you can see in this table here, this slide, we do not have any new CCAs launching. The last new community choice aggregator to launch was the City of Palmdale this past October. Now we are looking at expansions, and that can be a longer conversation. We can talk about why that is, but some of it has to do even with the compliance periods that we are coming up against, for example, in 2024 with the RPS requirements for long-term, 60% of the long-term PPAs. There are some challenges. So you're right up there in the first row, so yay. And also in 2024, as we know, San Diego CCAs are growing, and so congratulations, and we look forward to those expansions. Next slide, please. The other thing, and this is the only graph I have in here, folks, I'll leave that to other presenters today, but the reason why I put this one up here is, again, looking forward, we look at the departing load. So expansions mean that more load is leaving the investor-owned utilities. And one of the things Cal CCA does is we are very, very much involved in the policy arena. So both at the regulatory agencies and also in the legislature. And it's important when you're in those venues and you're having debates and negotiations to put yourself into the position of the investor-owned utility. And it helps you understand why they're advocating certain perspectives in these proceedings. And it's different now. Back in the old days, 10 years ago, the three IOUs often had a very common perspective in many areas, but now it's very different. And you can see that from this graph. You have in PG&E's territory, for example, by the end of 2024, we're looking at 65% of their load departing either to CCAs, that's in the solid color, or with the dash to direct access. And also on the far right, as you all know, in San Diego territory, San Diego Gas and Electric is looking at, in 2024, almost 80% of the customers that they've been serving generation to have left their service. And I think they're really waking up to that. I know Carolyn Wynn at SDG&E has talked to me about that in November, almost surprised to say, hold on, what do we do? But if you look in the middle, Edison has a very different attitude. They're holding on tight. They don't want any more load departing to CCAs. And we see that attitude with SDG&E saying, okay, how do we do this? Should we be getting out of the generation part of the business altogether? Will you help us? We've had a number of conversations in the legislature in particular around bills to enable that. Okay, so that's kind of in aggregate. Cal CCA then, as Barbara said, we are the trade association representing the community choice aggregators. We have 16 directors on our board representing 24 operational CCAs. Here you have our vision, mission, strategy. But to really put it simply, we are focused on the success of CCAs and specifically the viability of community choice aggregators. So for example, we want to ensure your jurisdictional authority of the elected boards, that it is not eroded, that CCAs are not put at a financial disadvantage as compared to your competitors. Consequently, as I said, we're very, very active in the policy arena. The board understands the efficiency and effectiveness of a shared service model in this space. So at the end of the day, I kind of think of it as we kind of conduct this very large orchestra here at Cal CCA, where we're particularly in the regulatory arena. We have numerous CCA staff members participating in the various cases. Can you go to the next slide, please? To explain that role a little bit more is we work with the board to develop a vision of California's energy future and create a pathway to implement that vision. And we've had a lot of discussions of what does the energy sector look like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and how do we chart a path towards that? As I mentioned, we coordinate and lead the policy development among members, and that's an interesting lift, especially as CCAs get larger and have more people engaging with us. voice of the CCAs in the legislature and the regulatory agencies. So I have to say, when I came on in 2017, that was my goal, was for folks in Sacramento to think of us and pick up the phone and call me. And now they do. They understand that we are a big force to be reckoned with, but that we also speak with integrity and fact-based. So that is very important too. Our data team has a huge contribution to the facts that we can put in front of people. And you can read the other things here: facilitate best practices, and certainly communicate and educate, which is the role of a trade association. So I want to talk just for a few moments, and I think this is where Barbara wanted me to mention both regulatory and legislative advocacy. And I think I saw Ty Tosdale on there. Ty has worked with us for a very long time at CalCC, so you're in good hands there. It really is our core value proposition for CalCCA lies in policy development and advocacy. And every year we publish our annual report, which kind of looks back at key accomplishments and also going forward, what are going to be our core areas. And if we go to the next slide, one of the things that we did at CalCCA early on is try to stop operating in silos, but to create the connections that are necessary. So we call these policy issues, and I have a huge policy team led by Evelyn Call, who's also our general counsel, that organizes between our regulatory affairs, our legislative affairs, and then our data team. And then we fold into that our communications team. So what we're trying to do is coordinate around these multitude of issues. And what you see here is I've thrown up here kind of our core policy issue areas. Right now, CalCCA, we are leading in over 40 cases and proceedings that occur at the Public Utilities Commission, the California Energy Commission, the Independent System Operator, and dabble a bit in the Air Resources Board. But it is a heavy lift, particularly at the CPUC. And in terms of accomplishments, they're kind of very detailed and nuanced and complex. But when I look back over the past year, and you see here in the top left-hand corner in the area of procurement, we have the RPS, Renewable Portfolio Standard, the Voluntary Allocation Market Offer. That was a success for us to ensure that our CCAs had that opportunity. We are very busy on the COVID-19 bill debt, both in terms of ensuring we could get money out of the legislature around arrearages, but also successfully advocating for the suspension of the IOU's waterfall payment methodology. So again, that gets really technical, and it's something we've been working on both with our billing operations and customer care staff committee, as well as our regulatory team. So we have 10 staff committees at CalCCA that are operating in different areas. The regulatory and legislative committees have requirements to vote on various issues and recommend positions to the board. So I won't go into all of them because it gets pretty deep and pretty technical. I can make the annual report available to all of you. But what I wanted to mention is what we see looking ahead in 2023. And I have to be honest and tell you that in that matrix that you have up here, the legislature tends to focus on the top left-hand side, procurement, and now reliability. So those are the two areas. They like to mandate. And I think you've been seeing a lot of talk around offshore wind. There are so many bills on that right now. And in fact, this is where I'm kind of, my focus is at the moment. Last Friday, the 17th, was the deadline for introducing new bills this session. It was a record year. Over 1,700 assembly bills and almost 900 Senate bills for a total of 2,632 bills. Hundreds of those are in energy. Hundreds. So we have to wade through those. Many of them were spot bills, which means in 2 weeks' time, we will see all of those bills be reintroduced with actual content in them. So this can get pretty heavy. One of the things that I'm very concerned about, and it's things that we beat down last year, particularly around resource adequacy. The assembly there was trying to, in August, push on penalties for those that weren't in compliance with RA that would include limiting expansions of CCAs. That is raising its ugly head again. Often not through a bill. At the moment, what we have is a very complicated budget proposal that came out of the governor's office, and the trailer bill language we're trying to grapple with, but it hits on things like themes around central procurement, which honestly is your role is to procure, right? So we don't want that to be encroaching upon the role of the autonomy of our boards. Anyway, so we see a lot of challenges there in the reliability corner. If you recall, the legislature was pushed into a corner in August to make a decision around Diablo Canyon extension, for example. There's a lot of cleanup aspects of that, strategic reliability reserves, those sorts of things. So we have a lot going on. We always have things that are as Ty will agree, there's always something threatening CCAs. So we're constantly in defensive mode, but also trying to be proactive and work with coalitions and other groups, which I think we've gotten better and better at. Every year we become more mature at that. If you can go to the next slide. Please don't think that it was just that matrix, but we have other important policy areas. Definitely we've made some gains, I think, particularly around supplier diversity and GO 156. I mentioned billing operations, ISO operations. I'll just flag that this is another area that we at CalCCA are having a look at, but Assemblymember Holden has reintroduced his bill from 2019 around regionalization. I'm not sure if that bill is going to go anywhere, if it has the support of the governor's office, but what I think is more important are regional coordination elements. Things like the fact that the West now, as you know, we have problems with the drought. We are having scarcity of resource adequacy. I know that most of the CCAs have had challenges ensuring that they've secured enough RA for the year ahead and for the month ahead. And we're concerned because in the West, there's something called the Western Regional Resource Adequacy Program that has just been blessed by the FERC, by the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission, and that we are concerned that some of the RA that is in our stack and basically the supply here in California is now leaking outside of California to other states. And that's going to be an issue for our CCAs and all load serving entities. So it's important to keep an eye on that, to understand it, and then to be active where we should be in those sorts of cases. Okay, I don't want to take all your time up today, so I'm just going to quickly give you a couple of updates. If you go to the next slide. As you all know, your number one job as CCAs is to procure energy for the load that you serve. And it is something that you've all been incredibly good at. And if we could go to the next slide. I lied because there is one graph there, but it's simply, you don't have to read it. I just want you to look at the colors and be super proud. We track here at CalCCA the procurement by our CCAs. We're past procurement. We're past just all of you being able to do power purchase agreements, long-term ones. And as you can see, there's a summary of where we're at the moment. In our last roundup in November, it's over 11 gigawatts of long-term contracts with new build clean energy resources. It equates to over $14 billion that CCAs and their counterparties are investing into the economy, and over 25,000 construction jobs. But what I also want to highlight for you in this slide is, one, the colors in the graph show the diversity. So we've moved from the orange and the yellow, which is primarily solar or solar that is paired with storage, into the blues and the greens, which is wind and standalone storage and hybrid storage. So storage where it is sitting with wind or with solar. So what I'm trying to say is there's been greater diversity. And in our next graph, we're going to see a lot more of geothermal, for instance, and that's the sliver at the very bottom. The other thing is here, what you see are pictures of real projects. So that's the other thing. It's not just about signing a PPA, it's getting it built and then getting it online. And so what you've got here are a variety of projects from geothermal to storage to win to Matthew Marshall and his daughter from Redwood Coast up in Humboldt County. He was our president the past 2 years, and they were breaking ground on a big microgrid project up there. So that's super exciting. And one thing I want to share is that last Wednesday, the Public Utilities Commission published a progress report on procurement orders. And the compliance date is August 1st of every year. And the highlight here is that for August 1st of 2022, the CCAs did so much excess procurement that came online by August 1st is that we made up the shortfall of the investor-owned utilities from the previous 2 years. So congratulations. This is something, Barbara, we're going to be shouting from the rooftops. But, you know, honestly, you think about that and you think about what happened over the heat wave on Labor Day, and it's really those CCAs, by bringing those new projects online and delivering to the grid, that we were able to avoid blackouts. Okay, finally, I just want to say that programs, it is another great area of innovation. And you can head to the next slide. On our website, you can go to our website, you can use these links to go and see what other CCAs are doing. And next slide, we've created a program highlights page. We're excited to add Clean Energy Alliance when you're ready to this program page, but it's a great way to dive in and get more information about specific types of programs. We have webinars, both internal and public facing webinars, where we use those to share best practices, to talk about what one CCA is doing, and we often bring in the partner that they're working with, and that way you can leverage that information to think about how could you adapt that to your own CCA without having to, you know, start from scratch. And then next slide, please. Again, I just want to mention that we do all the other things at CalCCA that most associations do with member events. We have a partners program, we do advocacy and campaigns, the public and internal webinars, and publications and information sources. If you could go to the next slide, I just want to mention one of them. We do have a number of publications. This is one that was published this past month, and I think I saw Andy Stern on here, who as one of the chief financial officers for the CCAs, he's been very involved over the last 18 months in our model practices staff committee, in helping to develop this guide. It's available on our website. What was also created by that group is CalCCA has a portal there, and you can see the link where you can go to that space on a page on our website, and it's a portal out to all of the CCAs where their key documents, including Clean Energy Alliances, the information is available. So folks can go in and look at unaudited financial reports, quarterly financial reports, fiscal year reports, that sort of thing. So it's something that we've done, and it's been greatly appreciated by the Public Utilities Commission and other regulatory agencies. And now I'll wind up by just saying two things, 2 slides left. Go to our website, tons of information. We do put out, if you haven't seen it, get on our mailing list. There's the cover of the winter aggregator. We put these out quarterly, and it's a great way. It's a roundup from all the CCAs of things that they've been doing. So again, you can go in, we provide it in a digital form and a print form. And finally, if we go to the last slide, yay, you folks are co-hosts with us. Clean Energy Alliance and San Diego Community Power are co-hosting with CalCCA this year. Our annual conference is going to be held May 17th and 19th at the Marriott Marquis in San Diego. Super excited. It's right down the road for you folks. On May 19th, we will be holding the elected officials lunch, similar to what we did in 2019 at the Redondo Beach venue. If any of you have participated in that, we try to get both state and state legislators along with the elected officials of CCA boards. On the Wednesday, we're going to have 8 workshops. And on the 19th, on Thursday, the 18th, we'll have 8 workshops. And then on the 19th, we'll have a plenary elected officials lunch. Lots of fun. Really hope you folks can make that. And Barbara has more information about how you can sign up for that. Okay, I'm just going to stop. I'm sorry. There's too many things to talk about, but happy to take any questions.
Beth, really appreciate you coming today and presenting. Before we take questions, I want to acknowledge that Mayor Esther Sanchez of Oceanside is here. Thank you. And before we take questions, Clerk of the Board, Susan, do we have any public comment on this?
There are no requests to speak.
Okay, great. So we can take questions and comments at this point. Does anybody please raise your hand if you've got a question or a comment? Well, okay. Yes, Christy, go ahead.
Yeah, so thank you so much, Beth, for being here. We really appreciate this. It's so nice to see all the work you're doing. And I can imagine, since we've expanded so much, has your staff had to grow in the same respect? And
yes, yeah, thank you. And I didn't put it on there, the staff org chart, because it constantly changes. But we are up to probably 15 people in-house now. And a lot of that is the project management that goes into organizing the CCAs. I think the real big difference too, Christy, is how we've been able to get proactive. So we'll take, in the legislature for our legislative committee and regulatory committees, for example, we create tiger teams around these specific cases. And I want to mention one of them, for instance, something that we've seen coming is the scarcity and the resource adequacy market. By being able to have the additional staff, the data team, we've been able to, we'll have shortly a white paper coming out on this. And we've been able to be proactive. In fact, just had an excellent meeting with the president and CEO of the independent system operator, who's now agreeing with our thesis. And in fact, we're getting energy division staff at CPUC agreeing with our thesis that there is a real problem with the RA market and working on solutions. So that's very different from 5 years ago, 6 years ago, when I first started and it was just me and all we did was play defense all the time. It's really,
it's so important. And we need to have the right friends in the legislature. I mean, I just feel like people don't really know what they're doing, crushing, half of the state here. So it would be important to get some more friends, I think.
Well, and that's a difference this year is, again, it's playing the long game. And so what we noticed is CCAs, several of their board members put their hands up and ran for office this year. So we have more friends in the state legislature than we have had in the past, particularly in the assembly. That's been an area where we've suffered. But for instance, the Senate Energy Committee has expanded this year because everybody wants to play in energy. So now there's 18 people on the committee. 13 of the 18 have CCAs in their district. So it's really a game changer, but it's that long game, right? So it's creating our own CCA caucus, really.
Very good. Again, just thank you. And we'll see you in May, I guess, or when you said
yes.
Yeah.
Great.
Esther, you had a question or comment?
Yes, the part about our all those bills and several of them being anti-CCA. Do we know where our representatives stand? Should we actually set up a meeting to make sure that that we're all on the same page?
Yeah. So first, what I think is really great this year compared to last year is I haven't seen any that are specifically anti-CCA. The last one I saw was last year, which was Senate Bill 1287. And it had to do with the financial security requirements. And it was actually Senator Bradford who's chairing the Senate Energy Committee. But we got in early to his chief of staff and he didn't pursue it. So I think the first thing we need to do and what we're doing is sifting through the hundreds of bills, categorizing them, identifying the threats and opportunities, and then we'll work with the first at the staff, then at the board, and then out to you folks as elected officials. I think, Esther, in particular, where I think that a good conversation can occur is at the elected officials luncheon. when we have state legislators there, what we want to do is have the conversation between them and between all of you of how do we best communicate? What's the most effective way that we can communicate our positions to them and get their support and assistance? So I think that's where we'll put our thinking caps on with all of you.
And when, did you say that was on the 17th or the 18th?
So that'll be on actually May 19th on the Friday, because this
Okay.
time round, the legislature is sitting on the 18th. We can't have the elected officials luncheon
Right.
on our workshop day. We're going to make it on the plenary day.
On the 19th at say noon or something?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly.
Excellent.
Exactly. But you're welcome to come for the full day. And again, we'll have instructions out how to register and everything, but we'll have some plenary sessions in the morning, and
Yeah.
we're hoping to get the state legislators there.
Yeah, and we just received information on registration, so I have, we'll be sending out an email to all of the board and alternates to gauge interest in participating, and we will get you registered.
Great. Great. Very good. Are there other questions anybody has or comments? Again, Beth, thank you very much for doing this presentation. Very interesting about, the state of CCAs in California. To kind of follow up on what Esther said, all of us probably have excellent relationships with our assembly members, state senators. Some of us have excellent relationships with Tony Atkins, who is in charge of the Senate. And if there's any problems, please chat with Barbara, and we can get on the phone or get in a meeting and make sure that CCAs are properly represented at the Assembly and State Senate. And I know that many of us will be more than happy to make sure that our position is advocated appropriately.
Thank you so much. And I have to say, Tony Atkins has been a huge help when we've reached out. We have a good relationships with Kip Lipper, her staffer, and so we really appreciate that. And we will be knocking.
Great.
So thank you so much. I appreciate your time today.
Thank you very much. So we go on to presentation by Dwight Warden, my fellow council member, as the Community Advisory Committee. So unless there's something else you need to talk about, ask, or present on this, Barbara, can just turn it over to Dwight. Let's go ahead, Dwight.
All right, thank you, Dave. We did have a good meeting of the Community Advisory Committee on February 2nd. We're close to up to full staff, 7 members with 2 representatives each. And if you fill the vacant Carlsbad seat today, I think we will be up to full membership. So we welcome the new members that were there. We did hear a presentation from Participant Energy and Tesla on the microgrid proposal that's on your agenda today. So I won't drag you through the details of it at CAC, but suffice it to say, the CAC thought the program was intriguing. They were interested and supportive. They had a lot of questions, and I suspect you'll ask those questions. And if you miss any, Barbara will bring them up for you as you view it today. But their recommendation to you was keep looking, keep it going. It looks worthwhile and valuable. We heard a presentation from Barbara on the new rates, very similar to what was presented to your board. And we heard a brief presentation on the Carlsbad vacancy and being filled. We then, the group went over the outreach program for Escondido and San Marcos. And I think this is an area where the Community Advisory Committee is going to be really helpful. And Barbara shared with us what the scheduled meetings are in those communities, when they are, and we're going to get the CAC folks to participate and help make those successful. And we've looked at the ads that are going to be run. So we're going to be helping for the full court press to keep people informed. We heard also an update and had a discussion on the Green Champions program. And I think that was very well received. The Community Advisory Committee was very supportive. As you may recall, the CAC had set up 3 subcommittees, one on EVs, one on future projects, and one on outreach to underserved communities. So we had a few people were ready in their first meeting to sign up for one of these committees, and we left it that others are going to think about what they might be interested in. And perhaps some or more will bring back and suggest additional subcommittees. So we can expect to keep working in that sense. And the group went over the work program that had been put together for the CAC and was very supportive of it. So that's a thumbnail of it. All's going well.
Thank you very much, Dwight. Barbara, do you have anything that you'd like to add to that?
Yeah, thank you, Chair Warden. We did have several events over the past couple of weeks related to the implementations in Escondido and San Marcos. And we did have Community Advisory Committee representation at those events. Appreciate the assistance of Paige Tessino, Mo Lasezade. We also had assistance from our Trepepi Smith team and had some Spanish speaker available to answer questions, and staff from San Marcos. We were at the San Marcos Senior Center. We made 2 presentations to the seniors. Our Vice Chair Musgrove attended those presentations. We also had a table at the San Marcos Elementary, the food pantry has a food distribution, and we were there handing out flyers. I think we had interaction with over 100 community members at that event. And so having a great opportunity to answer questions and give information about Clean Energy Alliance now that the notices are landing in mailboxes.
I would just
Very
like
good.
to add, if I could, that Jennifer Kirschbaum was also at the Senior Activity Center, and she's one of our San Marcos CAC members. Great representation from the entire CAC, so thank you.
Great. Are there, well, first of all, are there any public comments on this presentation? Susan?
There are no requests to speak.
Great, thank you. Are there any questions for Dwight or Barbara on the Community Advisory Committee? Well, again, appreciate the report, appreciate all the work of the advisory committee members, and look forward to having them continue to support and figure out how to make our CCA better. So we're on to public comment. This is a time when people in the public can comment on anything that's not on the agenda. Susan, do we have anybody that would like to comment?
There are no requests to speak.
Very good. Next, we're on to the consent calendar. The consent calendar is a Clean Energy Alliance Treasurer's Report for December 2022 and consideration of approval of consultant RFP schedule. Is there any item that anybody would like to add to the consent calendar or remove from the consent calendar? Seeing none. Susan, is there any member of the public that wants to comment on the consent calendar?
There are no requests to speak.
Okay. Is somebody like to make a motion to approve?
Move approval.
Thank you very much, Esther. Is there a second?
Becker,
Very
second.
Yep, very good. Susan, if you'll read the roll.
Member Becker,
Yes.
Member Bob Patel,
Yes.
Member Sanchez,
Yes.
Member Melendez,
Yes.
Member Garcia,
Yes.
Vice Chair Musgrove,
Yes.
Chair Drucker.
Yes,
Motion carries.
thank you very much, all. So now we are on to item 3, or new business. And this is a presentation about the power charge indifference adjustments. So Barbara, if you will make these appropriate introductions.
Thank you, Chair Drucker. Yes, thank you. We are fortunate to have engaged the services of Keys and Fox in partnership with San Diego Community Power to assist us with the various rate-related proceedings of San Diego Gas and Electric at the California Public Utilities Commission. One of the items that we track very closely is the power charge indifference adjustment, also known as the PCIA or exit fee. This exit fee is charged by SDG&E to our customers with relation to their departure from SDG service and the impact it has on contracts. We have, I think about a year ago, we had the representatives from Keys and Fox make a presentation to the board. This is a very, very important topic. It affects our customers on every monthly bill, and we feel it's appropriate to receive an update, not only for the board, but for the public as well, who may be watching or may watch in the future. We've invited Lee Ewing and Tim Lindell, both from Keys and Fox, and they are here to make a presentation. And I will turn it over to them. And do one of you want to run your slideshow?
Thank you, Barbara, and thanks everyone for inviting us to present on the PCIA. Yeah, I think I can take over here real quick.
While he does that, I do want to recognize and thank them for their hard work. It has resulted in exit fees, has had a positive effect on exit fees in terms of just identifying issues and errors in SDG&E rate applications or calculation, areas of calculations that should be adjusted. And we have seen some success as a result of their good work. So want to acknowledge that.
Great, thank you, Barbara. And can you see the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, great. Here, let me try and make it. Let's try that. Okay, great. Thank you very much. So again, thank you all for inviting us to present on the PCIA. Fortunate that Beth's presentation was earlier. So nice to piggyback on that. If you're paying close attention, one of the core issues she identified as being a particularly complex issue that was on her slides was the PCIA. So we're here to do a deeper dive into that. Before we get started though, just to give a little bit more background on our firm and ourselves, Keys and Fox is a clean energy focused law firm. We specialize primarily in regulatory advocacy, litigation, and transactional work. We have a significant presence in California, part of which is representing CCAs in these ERA proceedings. The ERA proceedings are the proceedings in which the PCIA is established, and we'll go farther into that. But personally, again, I'm Lee Ewing. I have been practicing energy regulatory litigation for basically my whole career, and even got started on that in law school where I graduated in about 2014. I have practiced basically across the country in various jurisdictions, including both at the state and the federal level, and have been representing CEA along with San Diego Community Power and SDG&E's ERA proceedings for the last couple of years. Tim, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Lee. Hi, everybody. Tim Lindell. Very nice to meet you all. I'm a partner at Keys and Fox. I've been litigating the PCIA and PCI-related issues for almost 8 years now across all 3 utility service territories in California. I want to reiterate some things that Barbara said. The really cool things that Beth showcased that all of you are doing, we want to be able to enable you to continue to do those things by keeping you competitive with SDG&E's rates. That's our job. It can be a boring job at times because we have to dig into very nerdy topics, very technical topics like this one. But they are, like Beth said, Barbara said, they're complex, but this is incredibly important. This is what keeps Clean Energy Alliance afloat. And so, I really encourage you all to ask questions. There are no stupid questions when it comes to the PCIA. It is a difficult issue, so please feel free to ask any question that comes to mind.
Great. Yeah, thanks, Tim. Reiterate all of that. So yeah, diving into the PCIA, it's born out of a law that states that remaining SDG&E or remaining utility customers must remain indifferent to the departure of CEAs, or generally speaking, CCAs customers. This, as Barbara alluded to, is the exit fee that departed customers must pay to ensure that indifference. The PCIA can actually flow either way, depending on whether the indifference calculation determines that for remaining customers may indifference that SDG&E customers must pay CCEA customers, or the more common outcome is a positive PCIA in which the CEA customers pay SDG&E customers. The obligation to pay the PCIA basically depends on the commitments to the underlying resources and how long those commitments last. So this will get into an issue called vintaging, which we'll dive into later in the presentation. But basically, resources are vintage to the year in which the commitment SCG has made a commitment to procure those resources, and departing customers are vintage to the year when they depart and are responsible for paying their share of costs to all the resource commitments that SCG had made prior to their departure.
That's right. Hey, Lee, real quickly on that first slide, just going back up there, the idea that the PCIA can be negative, the idea of, ending customers' obligations, all of these things are continually hard fought. So the idea that PCIA can be negative is a big fight that CalCCA won, for example, back in 2018. So all of these things came at the cost, or came on account of people litigating these issues at the Public Utilities Commission. And some of them are really hard fought wins.
Thanks for the color, Tim. Here's the basic calculation of the piece, or one element of the PCIA, which is the indifference amount. This is the specific dollar calculation to achieve that legislative requirement that remaining customers remain indifferent to the departure of CEA customers. So at a high level, the indifference amount is the cost of SDG&E's generation portfolio minus its market value. The cost is basically comes out of SDG&E's general rate cases. Those are consist of such factors as the fuel costs, PPA costs, CAISO market revenues and costs there. And then from that is subtracted the market value, which is again an administratively constructed thing that is comprised of, for each resource, the energy index, the RPS value of the resource, and the resource adequacy value of the resource. So,
Lee, before you go on, it would be possible for you to magnify this a little bit so it's a little bit more readable.
Yeah.
If you go to tools, and that may have Zoom on it, or there.
Can I
Yeah.
ask a quick question? It doesn't include profit costs, right?
It does, actually. So the total cost of SDG&E's portfolio includes the approved revenue requirement for their utility-owned generation. So if they own a generator and they will they will earn a return on that generation, that all of those numbers go into calculating their revenue requirement, and that revenue requirement is then inserted as the cost of SDG&E's portfolio.
Was that also litigated? The idea that we should be paying their profit costs above and beyond the cost of the resource?
I can't remember the specific litigation tied to that, but I think the utility would say, well, when you procure something through a power purchase agreement, that developer is also going to be earning a profit. That profit is baked into the cost of the resource. And so it's essentially going to be the same thing as if it's a PPA or if it's utility-owned generation.
Yeah,
The PUC does put a limit on profit, correct? for
Right.
that?
Yeah, that is a heavily litigated issue called the return on equity proceedings.
Yeah, and that's another thing. So the SDG&E is entitled to, I mean, this is the fundamental aspect of being a regulated monopoly. It's entitled to a profit on its capital expenses. So someone's going to have to pay that profit, and that's part of the share that gets divvied based off of when SDG&E made a commitment to its resources.
Capital versus the cost of the actual resource.
The capital versus like operating and maintenance costs. So the cost of the resource would be capital costs.
Okay.
Right, yeah. But the cost of the fuel is just passed through and they don't earn a profit on fuel or something like that.
And Chairman, you are correct that is heavily regulated by the PUC. Is the view better? Okay, great. So let me just make sure. Yeah, so setting the PCIA, the PCIA is set each year in what is called SDG&E's annual forecast applications. They file this on March 15th of each year to establish the next year's rates. They're generally their generation rates, which include the PCIA revenue requirement. So for example, in 2022, SDG&E filed its application for its 2023 PCI rates. We participated in this proceeding. The PCIA includes the indifference amount with which we just went over, as well as the portfolio allocation balancing account, which, sorry, all right, I'm at the right slide. Which is AKA the PABA. This is a true up of the prior year's revenue requirement, PCI revenue requirement, the difference between that and the actual costs and revenue that SDG&E received. This is meant to make sure that that bundled customers are not paying more or less than the actual cost and revenue.
Right.
Sorry.
No worries. Hit the next slide, Lily. I think we're on 4.
Is it not?
I'm stuck on PCIA overview still with circles. Is anybody else still seeing that?
Yes, that's what it is.
It's all right. Well,
Now we're on the end. Yeah, no worries.
Yeah, something happened. I tried to go full screen to expand it, and
There we are.
somehow made it stuck. Okay.
Yeah, there you go.
Is this big enough for folks? And
Yes.
okay. Sorry about that. But again, so again, the PCI that a customer pays is going to be dependent on their vintage. So that, again, that is the year that they departed the bundled utility service. So again, they're going to be dependent on their vintage, they're going to be responsible for the resources that were committed to prior to their departure. Again, I think Tim alluded to this already. The vintage can be a highly contentious thing. We are currently fighting issues in various utility jurisdictions about whether resources should be revintaged if they have significant generation or storage added to them, or if the utility proposes to extend those resources past their useful life. So the characteristics of the resource could change significantly, which we are attempting to argue should change the vintage and require a new vintaging, such that customers who departed previously are no longer required for this, are responsible for those costs.
Yeah.
Tim, did you have anything to add to that?
No, it's kind of hard to see on this slide, but you can kind of see how the PCIA is calculated from this slide. So on the far left side, you see costs, market revenue, and then you get the indifference amount. Those are the circles we already addressed. And all rates are set on a forecast basis. And then we go back the next year and compare them to what actual costs and revenues were. And that's the true up, which is the next line. So that can be positive or negative, depending on how the forecast came out. And then the ERA, the ERRA, that's only paid by SDG&E's customers. So that's why that's the 2022 vintage only. And you get those numbers on the bottom there. And that's the revenue requirement that goes into the PCIA. So those numbers are then divided by the load forecast. And that's how you get $1 per kilowatt hour rate out of those numbers.
Right, and this was a question that I remember came up last year. So just reiterate, the bundled customers do pay the PCIA as well. They're just part of the last year's vintage. So they pay for basically the entire generation portfolio.
Right. Yeah. So if you're in the 2018 vintage, then you would pay everything to the left in the 2018 column. So you would add everything to the left of 2018 up, and that's your revenue requirement.
Yeah.
And I'll just remind the board that we actually have customers in 3 vintages.
Yeah.
So the Solana Beach are in the 2017 vintage, the Carlsbad and Del Mar 2020, and Escondido and San Marcos will be in 2022.
Yeah.
Right.
That's right.
So, and as far as what influences the actual PCIA rate, there are a variety of factors, some of which we've already touched on, like when the vintaging occurs and when the customer is departed. There could be cost allocation issues within these error forecast proceedings that obviously influence that. And then a big one is market forces, market factors, and a big part of that is the gas prices, especially recently. And Tim is going to take over on that for the next couple of slides.
Yeah, thanks, Lee. So the key thing that does influence whether the PCIA is going to go up or down is the market value of SDG&E's resources. And the market value in California is set by the price of natural gas generation. So higher natural gas prices will actually lower the PCIA. Lee, can you go back 2 slides? I'll just look at our formula again. So looking at that top formula, I'm talking about the orange circle on the top there. So in the California Independent System Operator, or CAISO market, it is natural gas that sets the price within that market. So if you bid in a wind resource, a solar resource, a nuclear resource, regardless, the money that you are going to get paid for the generation of that resource is actually set by the lowest cost natural gas resource. And natural gas resources, the cost of those resources is heavily influenced by the cost of the fuel they're burning. So if natural gas prices are high, then the value of all of the resources in SDG&E's portfolio, from wind to solar to natural gas, all of the value of those resources is high. So the orange circle gets really big when natural gas prices are high. The gray circle to the left also increases, but it only increases to the extent that the cost of one type of resource in the portfolio, the natural gas resource, is going up. So when gas prices are high, the orange circle gets really big, the gray circle gets modestly larger, but the indifference amount goes down pretty substantially. Can you go back to where we were then, Lee? So you can see that natural gas prices have been quite high recently. So if you look at this chart, the gas prices you all would pay the energy prices you all would pay in the wholesale market from CAISO is the orange line. You pay south of Path 15, SP 15 prices. You can see those prices were between $200 and $400 per megawatt hour in the middle of December at the end of last year. That is an extremely high price for energy, especially off peak. To give you some, to compare it to another number, the price the Public Utility Commission set for that energy was $75 per megawatt hour. And instead we're seeing $200 to $400 prices. And the reason for that is because there's a war in Ukraine and there's sanctions on Russian gas. And because there's a pipeline in West Texas called the El Paso pipeline that's under construction. And so that is restricting the amount of gas that can get to California. And therefore the prices of natural gas have been really high lately. Go to the next slide, Lee. We've also had high demand for electricity. And so what's happened in the last couple of years is the PCIA, if you're in the 2015 vintage, and I understand that's before all of you, but we wanted a nice long line here to be able to show, the PCIA gradually increased from 0.5 cents in January 2015 to almost 5 cents in January 2021, and then it took a significant nosedive. And the red writing there is kind of a tongue-in-cheek joke. I want to say that we're the reason the PCIA rate went way down like that, but we are not the reason that it did that. We're proud of the accomplishments we've made in these cases, but it is really because natural gas prices have been extremely high over the last couple of years that the PCIA has gone way down. And in fact, Southern California Edison and PG&E have 5 or 6 vintages that are actually negative. So they have negative PCIAs right now. So customers are getting a credit on their bills per kilowatt hour that they are purchasing from those from their CCAs. The other thing I want to emphasize, though, before I turn it back to Lee, is this substantial decrease is probably temporary. I was reading in the Wall Street Journal earlier today that natural gas prices have begun to significantly plummet, and they are likely to remain low over the next couple of years. Now, predicting natural gas prices is not a job I would like to have. They're very difficult to predict. But looking out at futures, if natural gas prices do go down, it is a formula that sets the PCIA, and that means the PCIA is likely to come back up. So I think it's important to emphasize that the way the markets are looking right now, this is a temporary decrease, and the PCIA is likely to rise in the near future.
Great. Okay, only a couple more slides, so just bear with us a little bit longer. To really present the entire picture on the CPUC proceedings as far as the PCIA, there is also an annual ERA compliance proceeding, whereas you'll remember the ERA forecast proceeding set the rates for the next year. The ERA compliance proceeding reviews the rates and the accounts from the prior year to make sure everything is in compliance, and basically do an audit to make sure all the costs and revenues were allocated in the right buckets for each of the accounts. And this is where we can basically check SDG&E's math and as far as what actually happened, and make sure everything is accurate and correct. Somewhat less policy gets done here, but that doesn't mean that these cases are not without policy issues. So this is the last real substantive slide, kind of a recap of our participation in these ERA proceedings. They really represent the most direct opportunity to participate or to influence the PCIA. Obviously that fundamental concept of bundled customer indifference is within law, but basically how the nitty-gritty of how that is done is within these ERA forecast proceedings, and then some other tangential policy proceedings, but really the real crux is in these ERA proceedings. There's a lot of complex issues listed up here. Really, most of it all generally comes down to trying to ensure that that CEA's customers only bear the cost that they should be responsible for under the law, and that we make sure that PCIA is reduced to the greatest extent possible. We were successful in several issues in last year's ERA forecast proceeding. We also, our advocacy is generally, in these ERA forecast cases, we're generally the only active intervener. Cal Advocates participates, but they have they don't go deep into it like we do. So we're really the only ones checking SDG&E's work and really advocating for interests other than SDG&E's to a significant extent in these proceedings. And we've been successful in generally shining a light on some concerns that pervade for SDG&E. The transparency is a big issue for these proceedings. SDG&E has not always been the best about disclosing data, even compared to the other utilities. And we have made some gains there. We have made some gains on confidentiality and making more information public and bringing SDG&E in line with the other utilities. We have made some gains in getting SDG&E to provide us information where it refused to do so until we litigated the issues and had the PUC order them to do so.
If
Sorry.
I can interrupt, Chair Drucker, I see a hand up.
Yeah, I know. I'm just, I see Ed's hand up. Just waiting for Lee to finish off here.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm basically at the end here. I mean, it's again, I mean, these are the proceedings to influence the PCIA.
Yeah.
So I think, Tim, unless you have anything you want to add, I can wrap up on that.
Yeah, no, let's go to questions and
I, really appreciate Lee and Tim and Keys and Fox advocating for us so that we can make sure that we are getting the proper rates. Before I open it up to questions of the board, Susan, is there any public comment on this?
There are no requests to speak.
Okay, great. Ed, go ahead.
Okay, thank you again, Tim and Lee. Very, very good presentation. I understand that the obligation behind all of this is to ensure that we make SDG&E whole. And I don't have a per se issue with that. My question goes to the contracts. Who monitors the contracts? And I know they have to let them out for periods of time with some degree of assurance with the ultimate generator of the power that they will have a customer. So as we drop off, where does that power go? Is SDG&E paying for power and are they receiving the power? Or are they telling that provider, look, we have a contract, we're going to pay you, but we no longer need it? Because as we know, the power is not static. It's a very dynamic commodity and it has to go somewhere once generated. So is that generator then reselling it? Is SDG&E putting it on the spot market? And are we paying SDG&E for something that they're receiving funds for secondarily without us knowing it?
right. So let's take a contract that, let's say, was signed in 2018 for a 100 megawatt solar facility that was developed by a third party. And SDG&E signed that contract on behalf of the customers that it had at that time. And so the idea behind the PCI is not so much to make SDG&E whole, but the idea is to say the entire cost of that contract should not fall on the ratepayers that continue to stay with SDG&E in 2025 and 2026. So if they sign that contract in 2018, it's a 20-year contract. What SDG&E does is they take that contract and they put it into the cost bucket in the PCIA, and they bid the energy from that contract into the CAISO market. The CAISO market clears, they get revenue from that, and that revenue also goes into the PCIA, and that's part of what Lee was talking about with regard to the true-up. And so the costs and the revenues are then entered into the PCIA. In terms of who's reviewing those contracts, we review those contracts. We hire, or I should say, Clean Energy Alliance hires consultants. They have an excellent group of a team under New Gen Strategies and Solutions led by Brian Dickman. And those guys go in and they are even nerdier than we are. And they go really deep into these Excel spreadsheets. They take a look at, how much that resource was dispatched, the price that it received in the market over the course of the year, the cost that SDG&E recorded into their accounting books that they're paying to the generator from that resource. And then they go and they look and they see what the PCIA was for the year. And they say, okay, SDG&E, look, you have these 3 contracts. You did a good job with those. This one, we think you actually put that into the wrong bucket. So we shouldn't be paying those and through the PCIA. That should be paid through a different accounting balancing account. So rates need to be adjusted by X amount going forward so that we're made whole for what we overpaid last year. That type of action, that process happens every year for the 20-year term of that contract. When the contract is up, then the contract is terminated or it's renewed. If the contract is renewed at the end of its life, the contract becomes the obligation only on the customers that are still SDG&E customers at that time. So if it was a 20-year contract, only customers that are SDG&E customers in 2038 are going to have to pay that contract going forward.
Okay, so then my follow-up to that, and I'm going to segment it if we could. So
Yeah.
SDG still receives the power that they've contracted. That power then goes into the CAISO or other entities that might need it. Is that correct?
So the way the CAISO works is you bid that contract in, and then different load serving entities are buying that power back. So SDG&E sells it into the market, but then they're also procuring energy out of the market on behalf of their current bundled customers. So they are basically bidding the power in, and they could be selling that power back to themselves. It just depends on who is buying the power in the short term out of the CAISO market, or if they're working off of a long-term PPA.
I got to tell you, it really sounds like that power's coming in. It's made available on the grid. Somebody is buying that power, either Cal Edison, PG&E, whomever. They're buying it. So be some degree of relief for SDG&E, and that should factor into the PCIA. And if it does, then maybe I'm just not catching that part of the presentation.
It does. I'm failing to explain it properly. Let me try again. So if Edison has too much energy, too much RPS energy, or too much capacity, they're required to try to sell that energy either in the bilateral market or to bid it into CAISO. And so if they sell that RPS energy, then that affects the PCIA because it's called sold, let's call it sold RPS. So we'll go back to our 2018 contract. SDG looks forward and they say, okay, well, we actually don't need this 2018 contract anymore. So what we have to do under something called our bundled procurement plan is we have to go and try to sell that energy. If they can sell the energy, then it's counted in the PCIA as sold RPS, and it's valued at the price that it was sold at. So Lee, can you go to slide 3 again real quick?
So while he's looking that up, is there an incentive for them to maximize the sell price if they know that ultimately they're going to receive the cost of doing business?
Yeah, so this has been an ongoing controversy for quite a while. And you heard Beth talk about the VAMO. So I'll talk about the VAMO in just 1 second, the voluntary allocation market offer process, VAMO. So, but when they sell something, it goes into that orange bucket. If they don't sell it, it's in the orange circle as zero value. But if they sell it, then it's in the orange circle at the sale price at which it was sold. So that reduces the PCIA. One of the big wins that CalCCA got was to get the voluntary allocation and market offer process put in place. And what SDG&E does is it takes a slice of their entire portfolio and it offers it to LSCs. And Barb can sit there with her analytic team and say, okay, are we going to buy this? Or are we going to take the allocation? Or do we think we can get this cheaper? And if they take the allocation, then what is allocated out gets valued at the administrative benchmark. So instead of being valued at 0, in case it wasn't used, it's now valued at the green adder plus the energy index, if you look at the equation below it. So you do get credit for what's allocated out. And in addition, they are now required to offer in the market any unsold RPS as well. So you can take your allocation and then you can buy it as well. Or, you know, a CCA in Northern California can buy it as well. And it's put out into the market and bought. And so you have this opportunity twice to either take an allocation or to buy something from SDG&E. And in both cases, the market value of SDG&E's portfolio increases. That's not to say that there's anything that's not to say as though everything is sold that could possibly be sold. There is some RPS that is left unsold. That's valued at 0. And I think justifiably, that is a very frustrating thing for a lot of CCAs when there is RA capacity or RPS energy that is left unsold at the end of the year.
Okay, thank you. I don't want to dominate the Q&A. I'm sure others have. Thank you.
Right.
Sure.
Are there other questions? Esther?
Thank you. It certainly does sound like there could be some double dipping, right? So in terms of the contracts and the longevity, you mentioned 20 years. Do we have an estimated time that just about all the contracts will be met and then there's no longer an exit fee via the PCIA?
So there's two types of procurement that they do. So in terms of PPAs, yes, we know those numbers. We know how long the contracts have to last. They've disclosed all that to us. In fact, usually contract term is something that's public and not something that's confidential. So it can be shared in terms of how long the PPAs last. The other issue, however, is utility-owned generation. It's stuff they didn't sign PPAs for, but they went and built on their own. So, for example, SDG&E has 4 large natural gas-fired power plants that they own. And so an issue that we're investigating right now in the phase 1 general rate case that SDG&E has before it is trying to determine at what point do these utility-owned generation leave the books. So that's something that we're actively litigating in that case right now.
Okay, and the last question is, are there any that would be that they would have that are green energy that we could say assume versus wait until the contract is over?
Yeah, but possibly, but it would have to be SDG&E's decision to voluntarily sell their interest in those assets. It's forced sale is not something that the commission has been willing to entertain. Instead, what the commission has been willing to entertain is we're going to allocate attributes and we're going to offer those attributes into the market, but not the ownership or the legal title to the energy that comes from the power purchase agreement.
Right. And so you can't tell us at all generally when we expect most of this exit fee to be history.
No, I think that can be analyzed and produced. That's something that New Gen Strategies and Technologies would we be able to help you with. I don't think you want your lawyers figuring that out, but but yeah, it's something that certainly can be projected out is what your PCIA is going to look like over X number of years.
Okay. Yeah,
and then hopefully something you can hedge against. Yeah, no problem.
And we'll take that back and have that study done.
Very good. Are there any further questions from the board? Okay, seeing none. Again, Lee and Tim, I really appreciate this overview and your advocacy for the CEA and San Diego Community Power. It's great to have you on board to help us with that.
Thank you.
Next, we go on to consideration of approval to pursue establishment of a distributed microgrid program for CEA. Barbara, do you want to introduce that, please?
Yes, thank you, Chair Drucker. And while I do that, I will bring into our meeting space here the folks we have. The project or program that's up for board consideration came to us as an unsolicited proposal. It's a program that is being implemented in CCAs throughout the state, but this is the first in SDG&E territory to consider it. It's a unique approach to solar and battery storage for residential customers. Instead of the homeowner procuring or buying or leasing a program, in this case, solar and battery storage. In this case, the customer agrees to allow the system to be placed on their roof and in their home. And we would charge them the energy. We would have a power purchase agreement with Participate Energy, who is the capital financer of these projects. We would buy the electricity that's being produced and sell it to the customer on the bill, as we do now, sell energy to the customer, but they're buying back the energy that has been produced on their rooftop. This customer continues to utilize the system as if they had procured it, but since they're not buying it, there's no credit application. And so it opens up the possibility of having these types of systems for those consumers who may not previously be approved through the credit application process. CAC also maintains the relationship with the customer. In the current more traditional solar system where a customer goes out and buys it, we do not get to count that renewable energy produced as part of our portfolio. In this case, we would actually be able to count the energy being produced on the customer's rooftop as part of our portfolio, which is a great benefit to us. The Community Advisory Committee did hear this presentation, as the Community Advisory Chair Warden had mentioned, and did give it thumbs up in terms of us bringing it to the board for consideration and potentially having the board listen to it and then give us authorization of whether or not we should pursue it. So today, we're not asking you to approve the program. We're seeking your authorization to work with the team at Participate Energy and Tesla to develop this program for our customers. We would then come back to you with all of the particulars, with including the power purchase agreement, the particular program elements and rate structure for the customers that would enroll in this program. So I will turn it over to the folks from Participate Energy and Tesla. That is the team who have developed this very unique program. And I don't know who's leading it, but I will have them introduce themselves. So Stevie, I saw your hand first, Steve, so I'll turn it over to you.
Perfect. Yes. First of all, thank you so much for your time. We're really appreciative of you taking time to learn more about this program. Ethan Friedman and myself will be talking, but we have more people from the team on the call. My name's Stephen Pollock. I have been in solar for 17, almost 18 years. My most recent job was at Tesla. I helped launch the Powerwall, which is a residential battery 8 years ago. I was the first commercial person brought on to the team to do that, and I led all of those sales in North and South America up until end of December here. We co-developed this with Cal Choice, obviously with Barbara's input, with Participate Energy, and with Lancaster Energy is the first city that's gone into the program. It's super exciting, but one reason I'm actually even more excited to be here right now is I grew up in North County, San Diego. I lived in Solana Beach. I lived in Del Mar. My parents had a business in Carlsbad. So this is like one of my favorite presentations to do. So thank you for having us. Ethan.
Hi, my name's Ethan Friedman. Nice to meet you. My background really straddles between finance and project development. And we've done about 250 megawatts over the last 15 years of rooftop solar, as well as currently are about 3/4 of the way through construction of a 265 megawatt hour portfolio of standalone storage that we partnered with Tesla on. And it was through those discussions that we ultimately developed this program.
Perfect. I am sharing the slide now. I hope it's.
So Steve and Ethan, can you tell us what company you work for?
Sure. We work for Participate Energy, and we are essentially partnered with Tesla to develop this program.
Great, thank you.
Can you see the full slide?
Yes, we can.
Yes,
Okay.
we can.
Perfect. Seem to have lost my view of the people, but that's okay. So I'll do a quick introduction. So the program is called Distributed Microgrids, and it very much expands and is complementary to the themes that you've heard today. One of the goals of CCAs is clearly to support its residents, also to advance renewable energy. That is clearly what we are trying to do here. In addition, I think what you'll hear now is there's a concept of departing load from the IOUs to the CCA, but there's another concept which kind of in certain ways contradicts the CCA's goal to deploy more renewable energy, which is if you are successful, then there is less load going through the CCA. And what we've tried to do is take very traditional mechanisms, PPAs, really, innovative batteries, solar, inverters, and put a system together and finance the system and created a structure which basically tries to have the best of all worlds. We are trying to have an offer where the CCAs can provide behind the meter assets to their customers and still preserve them as their customers and still provide benefit. And that benefit comes in terms of social equity, meaning because it's a CCA offer, you are not credit underwriting your customers. You are providing a great offer to all of your customers, regardless of their economic status, but also promoting the benefits of resilience, green energy, and grid services, all well just so happen to be driving additional profitability to the CCA. So we're going to touch on each of those right now, if my screen will progress. There we go. Okay, so the concept is a distributed microgrid program. So the first thing is to define a microgrid. This is somewhat debated in the industry, but the way we're defining it here is if you have residential plus storage and you can operate when the grid is down, you are self-sufficient and you can be self-sufficient, and that is microgrid. We are not suggesting that people should be off grid, but they should have backup. A distributed microgrid takes that a step further and is a programmatic approach to delivering microgrids to your stakeholders and then figuring out how to best provide value to all the different stakeholders. And two of those stakeholders we listed here, your ultimate customer and CEA. So we will kind of go through those benefits now. And I apologize if anyone's raising your hand. Maybe Ethan, you could stop me, or Barbara, because I can't see people right now, just the slide. On customer benefits, which I think is kind of our first and foremost our target, it is a PPA in the traditional sense of a zero upfront cost. People aren't taking debt on, they're not being credit underwritten for that, they're not getting an adjusted FICO score for that. So it's a zero upfront cost way to have green energy and backup sized significantly to 100%-ish of load. And the reason we say that is because although we're quite happy that some new California codes require solar, and in some cases batteries for new home construction, that requirement is more of a compliance requirement. And what we're trying to do is make a bigger impact. Like, we really want to deploy systems that can ideally cover 100% of load, and also predict a forecast that people are going to be buying more EV cars. They're going to be converting to electrical appliances. So we think those loads are also going to increase over time. Even though those appliances are becoming more and more efficient, more of them are going to come on the grid in the near future. Emergency backup power with all the natural disasters, very important. We want people to feel a sense of security and resilience. Interestingly enough, on the third bullet, because we have spun up Participate Energy in coordination with CCAs and Cal Choice, and even had conversations with Cal CCA, this is not a high overhead business. So it's a partnership between the CCA, Tesla, and Participate Energy. Each partner has its own specific role. So Participate Energy is doing the financing, but we're not doing the design, install, O&M, or operations and maintenance over time. And because there's so little fat in this structure, that allows us to drive prices down to the end customer. Another benefit of doing this, which is in addition to procuring centralized solar, because you can go green by buying centralized solar, is we can produce this solar on site on somebody's home, and we can avoid the delivery charges. So that has a major impact, especially as loads go up, in delivering savings to customers. Another thing is fixed long-term rates. So as people have seen 20 to 40% price increases in 2023 already from SCE, SDG&E, and PG&E, I think people are going to be a little sticker shocked when they get their bills through the year and realize that those prices have increased, but they haven't really seen them yet. In addition, we can help people that are on fixed income, on low income, where saving that extra $5 is important. So some people, $5 isn't important, and some people it is. And we really want to create equity in this program. I am moving kind of fast because I realize we're a little short on time, so apologies for that. No credit underwriting, we talked about that, and universal pricing for all customers. The concept that solar, which is supposed to be good for the planet and good for people, had premiums attached to it for people that did not have the best economic situation, just didn't rub us the right way. So we really wanted to figure out a way, obviously co-developing this, to provide the same prices to all people and not have that be a factor. And we hope that that allows us to have a broader reach and more appeal. And that was obviously done in partnership with the CCAs to figure out how to exactly do that and combine the CCA's retail offer with the wholesale generation offer or product. We're working to include universal EV charging. Tesla has now launched a universal charger, so this wasn't possible before, but they are opening up even their residential chargers to being able to charge other cars. So we're very excited to be able to do that in the near future. And the last thing for customer benefits is this is the Tesla customer experience. You get the same full wrap Tesla education process, Tesla smooth, Tesla transaction, design, installation, and even ongoing customer support. So all of that is included in this program for the term of the project, which is 25 to 30 years. CEA benefits, as we said, a major goal of the CEA is to deploy more green power. This is super important, and this makes it accessible to more people. Retaining customer loads, it's the derivative of departing load, right? So we want the CCA to be successful in the long run. You'll see, as Ethan will describe, there's a couple ways that the CEA as a CCA will earn revenue, and it's not the traditional buy it wholesale, sell it retail. There's a spread. We make money. It's more of a partnership, and he'll go into the benefit of that. Coincident benefit. So this is where, as you know, in operating CCAs, there can be exposure to real-time market prices during natural disasters or major heat waves, where there's a lot of planning around procurement to plan for the 95 or 99% of the time that you're procuring. But every once in a while, things get crazy, and where you have financial hedges or other strategic planning in your procurement process, we call this a physical hedge. So this is a physical hedge, which during those times, batteries can be coordinated to discharge and make the requirement to buy power at really expensive real-time rates less impactful to the business. Again, this is a partnership. Participate Energy and Tesla are not looking to keep the environmental attributes, so that's really a pure benefit to the CEA in whatever way is possible. And the last thing is grid services. Grid services is a relatively young topic. There's been some demand response programs. There's programs like DRAM in California. These are developing, and we're trying to figure out ways, and through this program, we'll be working with Tesla, Cal CCA, Cal Choice, Barbara, everybody, to figure out how to use these batteries in a way that benefits the CCA and benefits the end customers as much as possible. And we also need to be fair to those end customers because they are paying a monthly rate for access to their batteries. So as you develop grid services, there's really a balance of who gets the benefit and who spends the money. This is more of an opportunity to explore with much deeper insight for the CCA in terms of how people are using energy with solar and batteries behind their meter. Because if it's a normal customer, a normal cash loan or PPA customer, that's kind of a black box. You can see up to the meter, but you can't see behind the meter. So this will give even more data and understanding, not at individual levels. There's privacy rules that everyone has to comply with, but in aggregate, how you can develop aggregate programs that are optimal and really smartly designed to benefit everybody. Ethan?
So I think we wanted to just break down how this program is going to work and how it's implemented. And it really starts with the customer. So what we're proposing is that CEA would launch a tariff that's dedicated for these systems that are located at customers' houses. And the customer would go to the Tesla website and essentially enter in an order There's no dollars associated with that, no deposit, upfront or ever from that customer. It's completely no cost to them. Tesla, based upon that order information, would design, build, and then ultimately would operate that system for the full 25 years. So the service call would be answered by Tesla. There's a strong counterparty there. We, Participate Energy, would buy the system as they're completed. And then once they are completed, the intention would be that the generation produced by each of the solar arrays and the battery services on a monthly basis would ultimately be sold to CEA, which in turn would resell those energy services as an on-bill tariff to your customers. And so we're structuring this so that the end customer benefits, CEA benefits, and Tesla Participate gets to deploy more systems. And the goal here is to recognize that by allowing for CEA to capture load generated behind the meter, you're offsetting what would have been sort of a structural risk to the CCA program in a way that we hope to be pretty highly profitable. So that's really the 30,000-foot view of mechanically how this is going to happen from initial enrollment through construction and then operations for the next 25 years. Next slide. So having established the program in terms of how it works, it's important to understand why we think this works. And fundamentally, it's because if you think of a traditional solar power purchase agreement in which a third party comes and sells power from a system to a customer, and then that customer net meters the excess energy back out into the grid, fundamentally, we have a technological solution because now we're creating solar energy that's going into the battery and is being fundamentally or primarily used on site. But we also have a structural innovation insofar as that by selling it to the CEA, our counterparty risk is the institution, not a pool of individuals. And that means that it's a much more efficient transaction. We have lower capital costs, and we can pass that through in terms of energy savings, what we have to charge on a per kilowatt hour rate, as well as allowing for these systems, as we've talked about, to be deployed without credit checks. And so our expectation is that even in places that have had a lot of solar adoption, mostly that's been restricted to people with high FICO scores that own their own homes. And by essentially going back and allowing for a more democratic approach, we think that this is going to be able to allow for us to drive a lot more deployment into even places where there has been early adoption. And that because we're ultimately domiciling this on site, we're able to significantly reduce the delivery charges. And so there will still be delivery charges to the extent that customers buy power through the normal CEA offer. But to the extent that we're offsetting that, and producing power on site, that is going to essentially result in energy savings as transmission and delivery is offset, which is ultimately creating the headroom on the bill that allows for us to charge for the battery. And so that's fundamentally what we're proposing to do, is to have a fixed rate, low cost energy price and a fixed battery charge. And those benefits will be realized by the people who need them the most, and ultimately provide just energy hedges over time as the spot market continues to increase and SDG&E rate charges continue to rise. So next slide, please.
Let me okay, sorry. Let me just add one more thing. This is kind of an abbreviated deck. This is intended to be open, transparent, and competitive. So there's nothing in this program that prohibits any other PPA provider, solar provider, cash sales, anything like that. This is an option for people that find value in it, and there's no intent to block anybody else out. The more solar that we get deployed, regardless of how people finance it, the better. And I think that was worth noting. Parties involved in the program, obviously CEA. I think you guys know that entity very well. Tesla, Tesla is obviously a big brand. It's very well known in the vehicle space. It's been in the energy space for, I don't know, probably 15 years or so. About 8 years ago, they launched the residential battery called the Powerwall, and also have had a new home or have a new homes commercial and utility scale solar business. So in California, all of those types of sites are designed and installed by Tesla employees. So there's not a big stack of subcontractors. Tesla has all the experience from manufacturing, all the software, the grid service controls, the design, permitting, installation, and local O&M.
And Participate Energy is a newly formed entity that is dedicated to managing this program, but the team primarily comes from Corporate Credit Inc. Our background goes back to 1994. As I said at the outset, we've developed over 250 megawatts of rooftop solar, as well as standalone storage, primarily for municipalities in California. And we also have a deep history in finance, having financed over $5 billion of equity investments into low-income housing and other tax-based transactions. And so that's a little bit about our backstory. And then as we look to sort of, in the future, expansion areas and where we want to go with this program beyond single-family homes, is that we believe that there, is an ample opportunity for this structure to be replicated for municipalities and for school districts, as well as commercial. And recently, within the last couple of weeks, the IRS and Treasury has issued guidance regarding low income and adders for low income. And it would be our hope to essentially co-sponsor an application to the Treasury with CEA to get an allocation for dedicated funds to have additional federal subsidy to allow for an even deeper subsidized rate that would be targeted specifically to care customers. And so we believe that this is fundamentally what the congressional intent was in terms of an energy community benefit project, and are very excited about that opportunity, as well as in the future, potentially retrofitting for existing solar with power walls and storage and multifamily housing. So maybe we can, open up the floor to questions. And I know that we are a little bit later in the meeting agenda, and so we wanted to try and be brief, respectful of everyone's time. And ultimately we want to, allow for people to have the opportunity to sort of address any questions they might have.
Yes, so really appreciate the presentation here. Barbara, do you have anything to add at this point before we go to questions?
I would like to add that we have a number of our Community Advisory Committee members that are in the attendees room, and Chair, if the board agrees, I'd like to invite them in, and maybe Stephen, you could stop sharing so that
yeah, if you could stop sharing so I can see all the participants. Just before we go to questions, it is like 3:47, and normally we stop at 4 p.m. And we have a few more agenda items that one of them, I think, well, two of them are time critical. One is and one of them is the mid-year budget. So are the board members willing to stay on for at least till maybe 4:30 or so at this point, or do we lose a quorum at 4 p.m.?
Chair Drucker, I do want to let you know that we did, a board member, Becker, did need to leave, and so I know that she left. In looking at the agenda, as you note, we have a couple of items. I think we can, I'm looking for our general counsel. We might be able to postpone the Brown Act update.
I think the major, there's item 5 we have to consider, and
I think those will be quick.
And well, I know, but item 8 is the approval of the budget. I guess we could do that next time. I just want to see, again, we are going to go beyond 4 o'clock right now. So does anybody else need to leave at 4 p.m.?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I do, but maybe Eric, can you stay?
I do as well.
Who was that?
Councilmember Melinda.
Okay.
Eric, can you stay?
I can stay for a little bit longer than that, but then I have kids.
Okay.
Yeah.
We'll see what we can get to, but
My briefing said this was going to be a short meeting.
oh yeah, well, I apologize for that. This is like the first time I think we've gone in the 2 years that I've been here. We've gone to had a 2-hour meeting, so didn't realize it was going to take so long. So first of all, Ed, do you have a question? Please ask it.
For the sake of brevity, I will just move forward and I'll ask the question at the end if we have the time. Let's try and clear as much as we can, Chair.
Does any board member or participant, community advisory people have any questions? The only well, I guess we will go to comments. And Mike, does anybody have a comment on this at this point? Ed, do you have a comment you'd like to make at all?
Well, I guess my question about this was, is this a product that would be available to existing solar customers? And then I have some other ancillary questions, but it depends on the answer to that first one.
Yes. So the answer is the initial offer that's being rolled out is solar paired with storage. Although it is easy to roll out a battery retrofit to existing solar, that's kind of a phase 2, and we're planning on doing that. Really, we're waiting for battery supply to open up to be able to do that.
Sure. So that would be something that would be afforded down the road, but not in the initial phase.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you. Then I can hold off on my questions based on that. Thank you.
Dwight?
Yeah, thank you. My question is bi-directional charging using electrical vehicles for your home storage battery instead of a power wall. If somebody wants to do that, is that accommodated by the program, or do they have to get a Tesla power wall?
It's really 2 separate systems. So the bi-directional charging is a matter of, does the car have a bi-directional inverter? And then how are you interconnecting that into the home? But it's not part of this program, but this program would not prohibit that as well.
Okay, thank you.
Are there any other questions? The question before the board is whether or not we want our CEO Barbara to pursue working on this. We are not making a decision to do it today, but should we pursue it? And so, does anybody have a comment on that? Any of the board members?
Yeah, Chair, I would be in favor of that. I would also like for our CEO to look into the how this would affect our several cities with their climate action plans and a benefit to those cities. Thank you.
Any other member like to comment on this? I would comment, that yes, I think we need to pursue it. The only thing, it sounds like a free lunch, and there's no such thing as a free lunch. And I want to, the devil's in the details. I would also, one of the problems with Tesla was that they bid on stuff, and then when the actual bill came in, it was a lot more. And so we need to understand the full details of this, the background to participate. Also, they are new, they are a spinoff of an old company, but to understand that and really understand that. And I guess the final thing is, as you're pursuing this, Barbara, to understand why other CEAs or CCAs are or not pursuing this. And, what's the history on this? But for me, it sounds like an excellent way for us to get more solar energy into our grid, into our provision of power, and an excellent way to get solar energy on people that can't afford it, or that can afford it, but it just doesn't make economical sense for them, because their energy bill is so small that, for them to put solar power on it, it has no economical sense for them. And this is a way for them to get that. And finally, I would say that I know some of the cities are pursuing electrification. And unless there's battery backup, electrification will fall on deaf ears for a whole lot of people because there's no way to have a backup. So I think it's an important thing for us to pursue. I think, Eric, you had a question or comment?
I just wanted to reiterate from what I heard in the presentation. This is not an exclusivity deal, and so that's a really important piece to me as well. Like keeping it as an option and not boxing us into anything in particular because it's such a dynamic space.
So I think there's consensus on this. I hear no objection. Barbara or Johanna, do we need to have a motion or we can just move on?
I would defer to Barbara what her comfort level is, but usually a motion would be warranted, Chair.
Okay, so could I have a motion on this matter?
Chair, I'd move that we forward this on to the CEO for further investigation with a report back without a time certain.
Second.
Very good. Susan, will you read the roll, please?
Member Bob Patel,
Yes.
Member Sanchez,
Yes.
Member Melendez,
She's absent.
thank you. Member Garcia,
Yes.
Vice Chair Musgrove,
Yes.
Chair Drucker.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, so the next is the next two items, 5 and 6. 5, they kind of go together, and the reason that we're doing 5 is if we need to have a special meeting between now and March 23rd at this point, we need to have the ability to call that meeting via Zoom at this point. So
If I could, Chair, the state of emergency is lifted effective February 28th. So the governor is not likely to extend it. So as it stands, number 5 is warranted. Should we need a special meeting between now and Tuesday, which is the termination date for the state of emergency?
Yeah, and we are going to go, most likely go to in-person meetings. So is there a motion to continue the state of emergency and hold our meetings up until February 28th on a virtual basis?
Well, this is kind of technical, but I'll just move just in case.
Yeah, it's very technical at this point. I just want to make sure that in case something comes up, we can do it. Is there a second? Joe, thank you for seconding. Susan, if you'll call the roll.
For Member Garcia,
Yes.
Member Bob Patel,
Yes.
Member Sanchez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Musgrove,
Yes.
Chair Drucker.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, so the next is a consideration of adoption of a resolution changing the CEA board to be an in-person meeting and the location through June 2023. The concept is to go to in-person meetings and have these meetings at the city of Oceanside. Yeah, so the question, somewhat of the question is, and I think we all agree that that's okay, is do we want to have presenters be in person? Number one, and number two, a different topic is whether or not we want to have the CEO, our legal counsel, and our clerk of the board also be in person.
Could that be an option?
is it not, we can do whatever we want per se, but you know, it is up to us as to whether or not we want to, you know, well, let me bifurcate that. Do we want every presenter to be in person?
Unless it's a hardship. Say it's somebody from a different city or something.
Esther, in your council chambers, do you have the ability to screen in somebody if they're remotely
Yes.
on a large screen?
Yes.
So I think our council could weigh in on this, but it strikes me that it's the board members that have to be present. Does that sound right?
That's correct.
Okay. I have no objection for the sake of the admitted hardship. It would be for some of the staff to be present unless it was essential at that particular meeting to have them zoom in.
So staff should be there.
Hmm.
Everybody agrees. The presenters, I would say, you know, we should have the ability for them to be virtual or present based upon where they live, like Keys and Fox. They're from DC. I don't think we want to pay for their expenses to show up in person. You know, and it's kind of the way I've always seen it. If they live in San Diego County or something like that, we probably want them to be in person. If they're outside of San Diego County or something like that, then it's, you know, but we'll leave it up to Barbara in some ways to decide whether or not they should be in person. You know, for a 5-minute presentation for somebody to drive an hour makes no sense, even if they are in an electric vehicle.
Right. I was going to say, you know, if there's a scheduling issue and, you know, they are within the county, but it would take, you know, a lot of maneuvering. It would be really nice to, instead of continuing that, have it done virtually.
Okay. And we do understand that it's going to take Barbara and Susan a long time to get to the meeting, but that's just one of the joys that they will have of being part of the CEA. Is everybody on board with that?
It's a nice coastal drive along the train or whatever.
Rhea, do you have any thoughts on it?
I agree with the mayor. That's Mayor Sanchez. That's totally fine. Yeah.
Joe, do you have any thoughts on this?
Same. I think that's the best way to go.
Okay. We do need to have a motion to adopt changing the CEA to in-person meetings specifically at Oceanside. So do I have a motion okay,
So
Esther
moved.
is so moved, and a second?
Musgrave.
Okay, thank you very much. Susan, will you call the roll?
Member Garcia,
Yes.
Member Bob Patel,
Yes.
Member Sanchez,
Yes.
Vice Chair Musgrove,
Yes.
Chair Drucker.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Barbara, I think we're going to skip your presentation at this point and move on to the mid-year budget adjustment, because I believe, you know, I think that's the most important thing we do at this point. Would you agree?
Yes, that's fine.
Okay, so I assume you have a presentation on that?
I'll make a brief presentation. So the item before the board for consideration is adoption of the mid-year budget adjustment. We're proposing to increase the revenue estimates by $16,084,120 and expenditures by $14,165,750. So it is a proposal where the revenues are sufficient to cover the increased expenses. The net increase to results of operations would boost our reserves, which as a new entity, building our reserves is essential to our financial stability. It also ensures that we're growing the funds necessary to repay our loans. The increase in the revenue is a result of several things. One is the rate increase that was effective on February 1st. We also, from the heat wave sold more electricity than we had anticipated. So we have additional revenues due to that additional increased sales during that period. We've also refined our energy projections through the end of the year. In terms of expenses, the largest increase in our expenditure budget is our power supply costs. That's driven by a number of factors you heard today. The cost of energy during the heat wave for the additional electricity. We've also been impacted by the increased natural gas, which has driven up our costs of electricity. Overall.
Barbara, could you show the one slide, the summary slide?
Sure.
I realize that takes a little bit of time, but I think it would make sense for everybody to be on the same page with you.
One moment, I've got to get out of the other presentation and jump over to this presentation. Technology.
Yeah, well, when we're in person, you'll have a lot simpler way to do it, maybe.
Okay, can everyone see the slide?
Yeah, just go to the final slide, maybe.
This is the final slide, Chair.
Okay. Oh, the one that shows budget versus actual.
This slide here?
Yeah.
Okay, so we're proposing to increase revenues by approximately 20% at $16,084,000. We have an offsetting increase in our proposed expenditures of 18% at $14,165,000. Overall, we would increase our net results of operations by just under $2 million and increasing our the amounts going into reserves from $4 million to $5.9 million.
Great. Any questions for Barbara? Very good. Any public comment on this, Susan?
There are no requests to speak.
Okay. Did you have a question, Ed?
I did real quickly. Barbara, could you email that presentation to the board members so we could have a thorough look at it, since we are having an abbreviated review?
You should already have the presentation.
Yeah, I'm looking right now through my packet. I'm not seeing it, and I didn't see it in the attachments.
It came through Susan.
Right.
Okay.
Board presentations, but yeah, just go ahead and send it out again. So it's
no, you're right. You're right. Thank you, Chair. I did recall seeing Susan's email. Just haven't opened it up. Thank you.
Great. Any questions, comments about the mid-year budget?
Looks good.
Excellent. Do we need to have a resolution to approve that?
You should take a vote, Chair.
Okay. Is there a motion to approve the mid-year budget?
Musgrove, I move to approve.
Is there a second?
Second.
Very good. Thank you, Esther. So take the roll, please, Susan.
Member Sanchez,
Yes.
Member Garcia,
Yes.
Member Bob Patel,
Yes.
Vice Chair Musgrove,
Yes.
Chair Druker.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, so item 9 is not necessarily time certain, but I think we can get rid of it very quickly so we don't have to do it again. And that is to consider appointment of Clean Energy Alliance Community Advisory Committee for City of Carlsbad. Priya, do you want to move approval of that?
Yes, yeah. I'd like to move approval of Linda Daniels to the Community Advisory Committee as a representative for Carlsbad. And I just have to briefly say that Linda is so amazingly involved. She shows up to meetings, she speaks up, at city council meetings, and I know she has been paying attention specifically here on the Clean Energy Alliance, has been a great advocate for the community. So I think she'll do a great job. So really looking forward to her advocacy on the advisory committee.
Great. Does anybody have any questions or comments on that?
And Chair Druker has joined us, so there she is.
Great. Thank you for joining us, Linda. Are there any public comments on this, Susan?
There are no requests to speak.
Great. So I assume that was a motion, Priya?
It was.
And I seconded.
Great. So we'll call the roll.
Member Bob Patel,
Yes.
Member Sanchez,
Yes.
Member Garcia,
Yes.
Vice Chair Musgrove,
Yes.
Chair Drucker,
Yes.
motion carries.
Okay.
Welcome.
Thank you very much for joining us, Linda, and good luck on the Community Advisory Committee. So next is board member requests for future agenda items. Does anybody have any requests? Seeing none, the next meeting will be March 30th, which is the final Thursday of the month for March, and it will be at the City of Oceanside. It will start at 2 p.m. It will be very interesting to see everybody in person. Some of you I've seen at other board members, some board meetings, some of you I've never seen in person before. So it'll be fun to see everybody. And, you know, again, actually to see Barbara in person. I've never met her in person yet, nor Susan or Johanna. So it'll be totally different. And I appreciate all of you hanging in today. I realize that we've gone over about 10 minutes. I will try to make sure that we have 2-hour meetings as best we can, but thank you for hanging in. And with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank